Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Marco. I love talking about video game music from an emotional perspective after spending a decade on the stage as an opera singer. Today, I'll be talking about Spring Meadows' Get Up for Lumiere. Really excited to analyze this and listen to it from an emotional perspective. Think fast! Baguette attack. Here we go. So I want to talk about this little corner before we dive into the big part. That's also the most replayed part. But thum bum ba da ba bum bum ba da ba bum bum ba da dum. This is the first time we hear the Lumiere theme with a bit of gumption, right? A bit of energy, a bit of that battle theme intensity that we all know. Those of us that are gamers ourselves, we understand that this is the battle version of that. There's a lot of energy behind that, right? And I think part of that's because of the space. Bum 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 ba ba bum. Bum 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 ba bum, right? And it's cool. Actually, that sounds a lot like chim chimnery, chim chimnery, chim chim charoo. I'm trying to up, yo. Chim. It's Mary Poppins. Anyway, all that to be said, I love the intensity of this. It's the strings, shun 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 shun. It does sound like marching as well, which is really there's naturally an energy in that and a slight raise in the tempo. Also, the way we start out with that single bow, kind of alluding to the danger that's at foot. Let's keep going. There, that little. That's really cool. Question. What's gonna happen? So, I mean, when I first heard that in game, I was like, oh, chorus, okay. And I tell you, a chorus of many singers really adds always an element of dignity and power and confidence and a sense of majesty to a piece. Now, what I think is really interesting about this whole soundtrack, having listened to all of it, I think at least twice now, is the so this is interesting to me because essentially the Lumiere motif actually pervades throughout the entire soundtrack. However, the notes are always ever so slightly different. So what we end up getting is pieces that sound like Lumiere, which is essentially the main theme of the game is Alicia, but the Lumiere is the heart and soul of the people of this world, right? That is the core crux. That is the, like, if we were to take a magnifying glass, Lumiere is the soul of Clair Obscur, right? The place Lumiere is so important to the story. And so what's really cool is that we are often getting it throughout many different pieces. But in this particular case, we get a slightly modified version of it in the cello, kind of like we did with Gustav. But in this particular case, it's to bolster and to sound, enthusiastic, to lead us, to march us into battle, to lead us on our quest to stop the paintress, right? And I feel like that's really effective. Also, again, sharp rhythms, always going to be effective. Bum, 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 always. Sharp rhythms like that are always going to instigate a feeling of battle, a feeling of propulsion, a feeling of, forward movement. Tempo is important and rhythm are important to having a sense of drive, to getting us from point A to point B. In order to get there, we have to move through that with rhythm and tempo. Also really appreciate the piano right before the big choral stuff. That's almost like a question. It's almost like a sense of like, yo, what the hell? Watch out, back attack. Back attack, baguette attack. There's almost a sense of danger that comes with that piano. A little bit of mystery, a little bit of like, oh, what do we do? Oh God, here we go. We're launching into battle. Boom. As we go up the scale. It's pretty dope. Love the twinkling in this. Ba-bum, ba-bum. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. It's interesting to me how these two sections have different musical contexts, right? The first part we just listened to, ba-bum, ba-bum, that's more of the like nervousness, right? More like, oh, especially in the upper register and the piano and the twinkling sounds and stuff. It's like, okay, well, can I do this? Like, are we going to be, there's that question, right? The question thing always is under there. Now this half, this is like, well, we are at war. Right? We have to go to work. We have to battle. You know, we have to do it. So it's interesting because the one is like, can I do it? The next one is, yes, I will do it. And I like that musically, how we can get these like little micro shifts. And you might say to yourself, well, Marco, why are you stopping so much? I'm trying to stop at each individual section because actually this piece, you know, it's only 4 minutes long. And yet this piece has multiple little micro sections within it that are different emotional contexts. So we have to look at a piece in a macro meatball scale, and also in a micro meatball scale. And in this particular case, I think it's helpful for us to take a look at all the individual sections of this to determine what each individual portion is emotionally telling us. And I think it's really, really cool that the music is not one note for 4 minutes. It's so boring if everything is the same, you know? Love that lower piano there. That's that danger. That's the enemy. The enemy's approaching, you know? And the sort of tremolo repetition in the strings. Ooh. And this is really like, we might die here. It's magical, it's mysterious, confusing. I love how it slows down and moves away from the battle idea. This feels more determined, doesn't it? Ba-bum, 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 right? A little bit more hope in that, kind of. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Determination. Dum 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 da da dum da da dum. You know, I have a thought. To me, it's like, you know, not to end at such a peak moment there, but like, why is the cello so pervasive? You know, it's an interesting thing. I think to me, and based on my ear, like the cello is such a human sound. And I think like there are a couple different instruments that really, really, really lean into the humanity. If we're not using the human voice, you know, we could use a trombone, we could use a clarinet, we could use the cello. And those are kind of like the instruments that are most closely related to human singing. And I find it really interesting how musical and how vocal the cello ends up sounding in this particular piece. And notice how, even though we have all this movement, the cello is actually the most pervasive instrument that is actually being played here. And I think that, to me, now, in Gustav's theme, we talked about how the cello represents, and if you haven't checked out that video, you definitely should. The cello represents grief. So what if that's not the same? What if grief, and again, we're just doing some like musical, emotional investigation. None of this is right, you know? But like, what if that grief and the chorus that's in there now is actually, the chorus and the cello are representing the group grief felt by the citizens of Lumiere and by the expedition themselves. You know, because now we have a party of people that are going into a conflict Maybe the cello is that pervasive feeling of loss that really accompanies us everywhere we go in this game, right? Or is it just simply like the individual characters? You know, is it Gustav again? You know, is it the collective what does it represent? And the answer is up to you, really. I'm just here to point it out. But I love that the chorus here really doubles us down on the idea that we have to fight. We have to march forward. We have to, as a group, as an expedition, we have to try to defeat the Paintress. And I love that's that sharp rhythm and that choral accompaniment, as if to say, we will not surrender, we will not give up. Or, well, the chorus just sounds awesome. So maybe that's all it is to it. One of the most interesting things about being an opera singer was and is the fact that I would sit down with a score, the music of a composer, and I would study what we interpreted that they wrote. Because not everything was exactly spelled out in the score. And so one of the cool things about music is that you can sit down with individual pieces and be like, okay, the cello is this, the violins are that. Okay, interesting. You don't need to necessarily ask the composer. Now we could, because thankfully, you know, everyone's alive. But, you know, having worked and interacted with many dead composers, you have to just kind of guess. And I find that really amazing because they may not even have thought about it as deeply as we, the opera singers, were as we were preparing their work. But it's important, and the beauty of music and art, to be able to explore the deeper thought processes that people may or may not go through. And it can only help to explore the ins and outs of something, even if the composer never even really thought about that and just said, hey, you know what, that would sound dope. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's cool. I love that we end upwardly in that cello. And then we actually are tons of uncertainty in this. Wow, tons. Now we do resolve, but we end up with like a lot of meandering there. Now the cello goes up, it comes back down. We end up with that twinkling sound. There's a bit of like stress in there as well. We don't know what's going to happen. Isn't that amazing? So while we do resolve and we do end up finishing the song, it doesn't just kind of leave us like with unknowns. It does kind of meander into a feeling of concern and a little bit of like, well, shoot, how is this going to go? I love that because it's not just like, hey, we're going to do great. Whatever. You know what I mean? It's just so beautiful. I love that. I love that. If you like this, there's lots more on the channel. I'm on a journey to get 33 songs uploaded for Clair Obscur. Definitely check those out if they're interesting to you. Thanks a ton, and I'll see you later.